This is a sequel to a video, and when I made the video the first time, I thought I want to definitely get my mom's take on this concept. So here's the video. It was called "Were My Mexican Great-Grandparents Wrong to Ban the Spanish Language in Their Own Home?" where I explain how they wanted to make sure that my grandma and her siblings basically had a better opportunity at life as an American if English ultimately was arguably their first language and Spanish not even their second language, just more of one they barely knew, and how they consciously made that decision as they raised their kids. So got a couple comments already from that, because I just recently published that. Our friend Joe Flores says this, quote, "I think that it's a wonderful life you had. No bias, a beautiful world to just love. You had great grandparents, or have." And then Stormy Ascent, quote, "Obviously they were not wrong. It was the right thing to do and admirable. I think it's admirable if people integrate, because I don't have a very favorable view on multiculturalism. Of course, nowadays, being raised as a bilingual would be considered a very good choice. Although nothing has ever stopped you from learning Spanish as a foreign language if you really cared about it," end quote. So I want to kind of build this on. By the way, I did take a year of Spanish in high school, but I had already taken like 3 years of French. I was always more interested in French, I think because it was more exotic. So I still can read and understand and even speak a decent amount of French. But I want your take on this. So just to confirm the facts, your grandparents didn't allow your mother or her siblings to speak Spanish in the home. They had to speak English.
Correct.
Which
yes.
means it made it difficult for them to speak with their own kids.
Yes.
But in theory, and what I said in the other video, the prequel to this, is that because of that decision, that's how they ultimately had better lives as Americans. And obviously, your mother, my Mexican grandma, married an Italian American who was in the same situation.
Yes.
Being a first generation American, but English was his first language. Did he even speak Italian?
He didn't speak Italian.
Yeah, so his father was in a similar situation, spoke broken English,
yes,
but fully spoke Italian.
Yes.
So both of your grandparents, or all of your grandparents, their first language was not English. They spoke broken English.
Yes, broken. Yes, except my Mexican grandfather, he took classes, so he knew English fluently, and yes, he could speak English. And the Spanish that I did hear was between them, my grandparents. My grandparents were talking. Then every once in a while, I would hear some Spanish, but just be with them converse, but not very much. Not very much.
The reason I'm asking this, the reason I made this video, the other video, was I had received some comments from people saying that it was a wrong decision, that it was based in shame that our Mexican American ancestors moved from Mexico and then basically kind of like just cut off their own heritage in an effort to make sure that their own kids learn English. And I've never seen it that way. Again, I think it was a very smart decision.
Yes.
Because they were coming from nothing. They were coming from such poverty, I'm sure, in Mexico.
And they were coming to America, and our language here is English. And that is how they felt about it. They didn't feel like everyone else needed to learn Spanish. They didn't feel that way. They felt like that they needed, that their children needed to be able to communicate.
And it was such an extreme.
Yes.
I mean, being bilingual wouldn't have been a problem, but I would still say had they been raised bilingual, they would have had a Mexican accent, which could have held them back in life. But when English is your first language in America, no matter what your ethnic background, whether you like it or not, it's going to get you further ahead in life. It's going to be easier to meet other people, talk to other people. It's going to be easier to get a job. You're going to probably do better in school if it's your first language, unless both languages are just perfectly the same. But I think with both of my great-grandparents speaking only Spanish, it was going to be that much more of a challenge to create these truly bilingual kids, unless they went through an extreme to say, don't speak Spanish in our home. So it's pretty progressive thinking, in my opinion, for the 1940s?
That would have been the 1930s.
1930s. I mean, that was very smart, and I'm very grateful for that, because I truly believe, and I don't know how you feel, I truly believe I wouldn't exist if it weren't for that decision. I think the likelihood is that Grandma would have married someone else who spoke Spanish, and she would never have met and married an Italian American who also had English as his first language. How do you feel about that? Do you think that it was that important into our existence as human beings? That, I mean, I know that may sound extreme, but I really think it was that important.
Yes, I do. I think it was important, you know, because it does make a difference. Grandma was able to communicate with everyone, and so we didn't have that. We didn't have the broken in our home. We didn't have the broken English. We didn't have the, you know, her stalling to try to think of, you know, okay, which word am I thinking about? I mean, where's, you know, where I grew up with, you know, trying sometimes like talking to my grandparents in the broken English and trying to figure it out, except my Mexican grandfather.
Yeah.
We could communicate with him, but
yeah,
yes, I feel that way.
There have been critics to say that it was a shameful thing that they did that, and that it was denying part of, you know, who they were. But I say you can still completely be proud of your ancestry and where you came from, and at the same time fully embrace being an American, which is what I believe they did. And I believe that's what America is about, is wherever you came from, now you're here and we're glad you're here and you're one of us. And that's all it came down to. It's not about covering anything up, it's about blending everything. To me, that's what it comes down to.
Yes, because if you think about, you know, all the people that moved here to America, and I mean, how could that be fair if that we have to learn French and Italian and, you know, learn in Spanish and, you know, learn all these different languages? It just makes sense that English is the language.
Yeah, I mean, whatever country it is, there's going to
be country. Yes,
yeah, there's going to be that language that most people speak. So I'm just glad that they were that progressive to think, you know what, most people speak English. Even if we ourselves don't learn it, we're going to make sure our kids do. So they were looking out for their own future generations. I just think that I couldn't exist without that decision. I think it really was that important.
And it worked out well too for Grandma growing up on her street. They had all the nationalities growing up on Simon Avenue. She always talked about Simon Avenue.
Look that up on Google Maps. Simon Avenue in Buffalo, New York, right?
Yeah, and it was Lackawanna, New York.
I don't even know how to spell that.
Lackawanna, Lackawanna.
Google that.
It's right outside of Buffalo.
And Google that in New York. Look it up on Google Maps and we can find out how much it looks like Sesame Street, because I'm thinking about Sesame Street right now.
Yes, because I mean, she talked, you know, there were Jewish people and French people. I mean, there was all the nationalities were there. So I mean, it's just a good thing that they all learned English. They could communicate together, which they couldn't learn. That'd be difficult to learn 6 or 7 different languages that were on that street. But instead, they were friends. They were friends. You had all these different nationalities, and their parents were making them speak English. They were living in America, and it's a good thing. They were friends. They were lifelong friends.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that you can't deny the fact that if you come to America, the better your English is, the better your life is going to be.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, if you come to America, you better learn to speak our language. I'm not one who says that, but I do know the business aspect of it, that you're going to be more prosperous if you can speak English in addition to whatever language you speak. Absolutely, that definitely determines things. And again, so progressive of the decision that I see no shame in that at all. No. I think it was very smart, and I even credit that cleverness, if that's a word. And I have an English degree, so I should know if that's a real word. But I attribute that to even them, as far as when I think of Mexican ancestors, hardworking people trying to get ahead. Even that decision was a major part of that concept and identity, I think. So that's how we feel about it. Some people will disagree, but that's how in our hearts we feel about that decision.